heard that, kids? Time for another monster chiller horror theater. And tonight, we really have a frightening movie for you tonight, kids. This is really going to be scary. I'm not kidding you this time.
That's my version of a trigger warning, and the closest I'm ever going to get. But I figured, since the person I'm profiling here has provoked the need for safe spaces on campuses she's lectured at, it's the least I could do. Because obviously, Professor Christina Hoff Sommers is scary. Scary stuff, kids. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. This is the first official installment in my SJW Rehab series on how to best disengage yourself from the Moriarty's web of SJW culture. It's not directed at those still balls deep in it, or all holes fully plugged if you prefer, but at those who are 1 foot in and 1 foot out and are trying to figure out how to get back to reality, reason, and sanity. I chose Professor Hoff Sommers for my first profile because, to me, she represents the ideal of questioning the factual inaccuracies of the SJW movement while simultaneously maintaining a non-partisan, non-vitriolic approach. She self-identifies as an equity feminist, which essentially means she's actually focusing on all the equality bullshit the modern feminists sling around as the dictionary definition of feminism, but which bears no actual resemblance to equality in their practices. So, while I personally would rather be called a syphilitic goat fillator than a feminist, she is the real deal. So, a little bit of background. By everything I've found, Christina Hoff Sommers was born in California and earned her BA in 1971. Then her PhD in philosophy in 1979. She then went on to become a university instructor and then an assistant professor of philosophy in 1980 and an associate professor in 1986. Whatever criticisms of the academic environment you may have, and I probably also share because that's going to be its own video, you can't say she isn't passionate, she isn't learned, and she isn't devoted to critical thinking and ethics. She is a campus lecturer, seasoned debater, and now occupies a position at the American Enterprise Institute as a resident scholar. She's published several books critiquing modern feminism and gender assumptions, and leads a popular YouTube series called The Factual Feminist, both of which I'll link to in the low bar. The Factual Feminist series deftly deflates the bloated balloons of commonly accepted feminist talking points that are exaggerated, misquoted, or just flat-out bullshit. Especially the ones that, no matter how many times they're criticized and debunked, continue to be screamed through the SJW bullhorn as truth and fact. Professor Hoff Sommers exhibits the rare gift of being able to discredit modern feminist claims without condemning womanhood itself. But even with her reasoned calm, she's come under attack for not being a real feminist, simply because she adeptly refutes emotional arguments of patriarchy and rape culture with facts, and is willing to point out when government agencies are grossly favoring female interests, such as with her recent tweets about women's issues garnering more financial support than child victims of neglect by the National Institute of Health, or pointing out that the 1 in 5 rape statistic on campus is specious, or perhaps most famously, debunking the wage gap myth. It's a common tactic of the left when encountering an opponent who does not fit into the cartoonish stereotypes to just make them fit somehow, because pulling a gotcha on character assassination is much easier than trying to form real arguments against a clever opponent. If you question the left, you have to be either a red-faced, fist-pumping conservative or some kind of religious nutter, preferably both. Well, I've been watching The Factual Feminist for a while now, and reading her writings, and if she's a Trojan conservative, then Milo Yiannopoulos doesn't really like the cock. Oh, wait, they say that about him too, because no real faggot would ever support the right. Fucking hell. I mean, come on guys, how often does he say daddy? That's your first tip-off, he's a real gay. On a personal note, I'm especially fond of Professor Hoff Sommers' examination of women in STEM fields. I am a woman in STEM, and I've always found her observations to be completely supported in my own lived experience. The reality is that women are not being held back in STEM. In fact, there's strong evidence that this is a preference-based phenomenon, even accounting for external factors. I'll link to a long but very thorough study conducted in 2009 by Stephen J. Sessi, Wendy M. Williams, and Susan M. Barnett at Cornell University. One of the author's main glaring conclusions, after measuring the spatial and verbal differences between men and women, was, quote, "Clearly, preferences must be a strongly causal factor in their opting to enter other careers." End quote. No shit. Preferences. There are so many accommodations and pandering to female students in universities now. You would think when the patriarchal gates were opened, women would be flooding in. But they're not. Why? Because they give more of a shit about other fields, especially fields where they get to talk. Occam's razor. Stop trying to find zebras when it's just a horse. Anyway, Professor Hoff Sommers has never advocated violence against or silencing of her opponents. Yet her cold steel scalpel really seems to piss off the feminists, a group she maintains membership in by her own conviction and self-identity. Jesus, if I was a feminist, I'd be jumping for joy that someone like that was on my team, was using the word feminist and not being a giant douchefuck about it. She lends the feminist movement credibility, for fuck's sakes. She's the one person I think of when I have to admit, okay, so not all feminists are like that. But no. She's been met by protests, bomb threats. Her university audiences have required safe spaces and trigger warnings to protect themselves and recover from her presence like she's Mecca Hoff Sommers.
Mecca Hoff Sommers!
Why? Because she's right. She's powerful and experienced. Her gravitas, made more so by comparison in the growing academic culture of shrinking violets who can't bear to examine difficult yet necessary concepts in their own professional fields. Look at her. Look at her. She's terrifying, yes? I suppose to people with their fingers stuck in their ears going, la la la, my feminism. She is. Because she is a juggernaut of logic, research, and conviction. And she presumably has a vagina, which according to some makes her literally a denizen of hell for bullseyeing every feminist straw man. And how much easier would it be for her to reject the label of feminism entirely? As I said earlier, she already has critics accusing her of being anti-feminist. But no, she is a feminist. It is her identity. She owns it. This flies in the face of polarized left-right, feminist, anti-feminist polemic, and I can only speculate it's a difficult window to fly in. Yet she does it, with style, reason, fact, and dukes-up challenge. Brava, Professor Hoff Sommers. Brava. So how does this relate to you? There's a noted tendency for those leaving cults, or fascist ideologies if you prefer, to polarize to the opposite extreme. I call this the rubber band effect, but it can also be compared to stages of grieving. Because, yes, it is a loss to wake up one day and realize you've been lied to your entire life. You will get angry. And it's in this anger phase that there's a temptation to swing your pendulum to the opposite side. Like, you realize you've been lied to in race relations like Black Lives Matter, but you'll find brother or sisterhood in Stormfront. Or you realize the truth behind hypergamy and Briffault's law and all the ways men are massively screwed in North America. So you go full rage boner AWOL MGTOW. This is reflected in the horseshoe theory of political science. Resist the urge to run as far in the opposite direction as you can. You will only be trading one master for another. You may eventually gravitate to those positions over time and examination, but bouncing like a game of Pong from one edge of the screen to another without pause for thought is still a position based in gut reaction, emotion, and not reason and argument. I think it's important for me to clarify something here. It's the compulsion toward extremes after loss I'm cautioning against, not the ideology itself. You're going to end up where you end up. and I got squat to say about that. There are some incredibly strong and reasoned nationalist, alt-right, MGTOW voices. MGTOW, men going their own way. But over my years in political and debate forums, I have observed some to be so blinded by rage they've lost the ability to reason. They fall back on the same feel-good, emotional positions the SJW movement uses. When you've been wronged, it feels really good to hate the people who wronged you. It's a predictable part of the healing process. And anybody who tells you, just don't be mad, doesn't understand. But you don't need to go full-on right-wing Viking warrior simply because you now see the holes in left-wing ideology. Although if you do want to go full Viking warrior, I suggest the YouTube user Thorium as a good place to start. He has amazing videos. Anyway, I know the middle ground of classical liberalism is criticized by almost everyone, but being in the I don't know yet center is not a bad place to be when you're coming back from being immersed in a certain ideology. Read everything, watch everything, question and fact-check everything. You will not find a single source you can 100% trust 100% of the time. You don't need to be partisan. You don't need to adhere to any label you don't want to have. All you have to be able to do is present rational arguments on their own merit and fuck identity politics for a while. Figure yourself out. But to get back to Professor Hoff Sommers, she has earned the nickname Based Mom in the online community. Based refers generally to being authentic, grounded, no bullshit. You will not find Professor Hoff Sommers ever presenting an emotional, irrational, or false premise. She is calm, firmly grounded in reality, and deals only with facts and research. She does not glom onto any protective umbrella of collectivist identity, but has carved her own niche. Professor Hoff Sommers navigates these political waters with aplomb, never devolving into rabid attack, but never straying from her own compass either. You can too. Just because you are questioning and potentially rejecting the SJW narrative does not mean you hate equality. It doesn't mean you can't still identify as feminist if you wish, and you don't need to suddenly start tattooing Alex Jones's face on your arse. It just means you're going to have to actually work to justify your position and why you are choosing those labels in the face of objective criticism from all sides, because you can no longer rely on the virtue signaling of SJW buzzwords. There's always somebody who's going to hate you based on what you believe, whether you have the legitimacy of a group around you or not. You may as well be hated authentically, based on who you are, and not just by the patches on your jacket. Keep your eye on the prize. Stay based. Stay you. But a you based in reality and reason. Thank you for listening.
Mega Hoff Sommers.